Hello, and thank you for joining us. The webinar will be beginning shortly. Thank you for joining us. Our webinar will be beginning soon. While everybody is coming into the room, I just wanted to give some announcements for upcoming webinars with COEH. Next Tuesday, September 8th at 12 p.m. Pacific will be IH pilot studies, current research in food truck exposure and customized PPE with Dr. Jianghua Oh from the Deep South Center for Occupational Health and Safety. Wednesday, September 16th at 12 p.m. Pacific, we'll be partnering with the North Carolina Occupational Safety and Health Education and Research Center for the webinar Seat Bolster Design and Discomfort in Agricultural Equipment by the NIOSH trainee Clayton Hutmacher. For more events and webinars that we'll have upcoming in the next few months, visit coeh.berkeley.edu/about-CE. I'll give another minute or so for people to come into the room, and then we'll get started. Thank you for joining us. On behalf of the Center for Occupational Environmental Health, I would like to welcome you to our webinar, Risk and Safety Training, Leveraging Microlearning, presented to you by the UC Riverside Risk and Safety Training Center of Excellence. A few housekeeping items first. You will be muted during this presentation. If you would like to ask a question, please enter it into the Q&A box. We will save time at the end of the presentation to address as many questions as possible. A PDF of the slides along with the list of any available resources will be available on the webinar's website page sometime tomorrow. This presentation is being recorded and will be made available on the Center for Occupational and Environmental Health YouTube page and on our website, coeh.berkeley.edu. All participants who logged in today with their registration email will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the recording and an evaluation form that will qualify participants for a certificate of completion worth 1 continuing education contact hour. At this time, we are so pleased to welcome our presenters. The Risk and Safety Training Center of Excellence develops system-wide training, distributes courses, and maintains a central repository, evaluates impacts and standardizes education initiatives for risk, environmental health, and safety issues. They produce training in a variety of blended formats, including e-learning, instructor-led, tutorials, and webinars. Some of their services include consultation on training requests, customization, hybrid courses, instructional design, learning management system or LMS implementation support, photography, videography, and source training materials. The first speaker today will be Janette Ducut, and she has her Doctor of Education degree and has spent the last 20 years managing regulatory-based education programs in higher education and nonprofit institutions. She specializes in online training, video production, and integrating active learning experiences. Cassandra Greenawalt has over 12 years of experience in education, training, and analytical work with the University of California. Her expertise is in instructional design, analysis, and development of multimedia content. Cassandra is also a registered dietitian who is passionate about wellness and behavior change. My-Linh Tran has spent the last 6 years working in instructional design, marketing, and higher education. She specializes in developing up-to-date training, creating engaging videos, and seeking innovative training solutions. The last speaker, Heather Davis-Russell, has over 20 years of experience in training and education, ranging from community-based organizations, local government, nonprofit, and has been with the UC system for the last 3 years. She specializes in instructor-led training, instructional design, marketing, and developing multimedia content. Thank you all for joining us.
So thank you for having us and joining with us today. Our team is really excited to share with you how we've been integrating microlearning within the University of California. We really believe that these philosophies we'll be sharing with you has led to not just effective training, but training that people seem to want more of. So what we're going to do is we are going to be going over an overview of what is microlearning and why it's important, how to integrate it, a simple two-step process. We'll be sharing some examples of how we have applied it to instructor-led training, e-learning, and video production, and then some resources or free tools to create impactful trainings. And at the end, hopefully, if we have time, we'd like to demonstrate one of the activities that we'll be talking about, which will be polling. So first, I'll go over an overview. So microlearning, what is it? Microlearning is essentially another term for small units of learning. It's training that delivers short bursts of content for people to digest. And you're trying to, when you do microlearning, you're trying to convey one topic at a time and one topic as part of a larger program. And so what's really, really valuable about microlearning is that it helps reduce cognitive overload. A lot of times people forget things, or it's not easy to remember a lot of information, especially with risk and health and safety training. And this is not just because of the topic, but also because short-term memory is limited. So it's important to simplify information so it can be easily remembered. Microlearning also helps focus on behavior and performance and skills versus just memorizing information. So it helps to apply things on the job, and it really helps to adapt adult learning principles. So a lot of our constituents are people who have existing skills and experiences and motivation and readiness to learn. And if we're going to be effective in training, we really want to tap into some of those things instead of treating people like they're sort of a blank slate. So that's microlearning. And the reason why it's really important often is because a lot of current demonstrations of training have this challenge in that we tend to try to focus a lot of content in a little bit of clock. So a lot of information in a little bit of time. And that really kind of comes in conflict with the way that people retain information. So if you look at Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve, there's a steep decline after just 20 minutes of being exposed to content. And so over time, after even just an hour, if not a whole month, there is very little amount of information remembered. And so if we can make use of the first 20 minutes, or what I would say the first 10 to 15 minutes, by integrating microlearning, then we're creating training that's much more memorable. And so because people forget, a lot of ways that we want to ensure that they retain information is by integrating ways of remembering. And so this is a cone of learning. It's age-old kind of a graphic research that describes the most impactful way of integrating training is to focus on active learning. So, which is the bottom kind of red part of the pyramid. A lot of times people will remember only 10% of what they read, like for example, on a PowerPoint or in a document, maybe 20% of what you will say after a couple of weeks. But if you have them do a little bit more hands-on activities, workshops, teach back simulations, and what we'll be talking about scenarios, they're more apt to remember 70% to 90%. So many more activities if you integrate what's called active learning, a component of microlearning. And so although people will forget, there are things we can do to ensure that they remember. So how do you integrate how do you integrate microlearning? Well, we kind of have just broken it up into a simple two-step process. To ensure you integrate microlearning, you just want to think about time and activity. So the first thing is time. Think about a lesson. Let's imagine that we have a lesson of 5 different components that we're trying to convey in an hour. What we want to do in the first step is just break those down into smaller bits and pieces that are maybe 10 to 15 minutes long each. And so after we kind of do what's called chunking, breaking them down to smaller lessons that are shorter, then we want to intersperse sort of integrate active learning activities either between or within these lessons. Another term is practice. So shorten your time for each lesson and integrate an activity so that people can practice. So chunk and practice. We're going to kind of demonstrate that next. But before we do that, we kind of want to talk about, like in microlearning, you do not want to try to convey so much like 10 concepts in an hour. Instead, what I tell people is try to think about conveying one concept every 10 minutes, so delivering in small packages. We don't want to try to lecture the whole time, but instead we want to try to be facilitators of activities, and these activities, which we'll show you, can include scenarios, role plays, simulations. We're not trying to cover topic after topic in microlearning. Instead, we're trying to give breaks between topics so that people can digest what they're hearing. We're not trying to focus on memorization of facts or history or information, but instead we will try to repeat information to reinforce what people need to do on the job using practice or videos, maybe infographics or quizzes. And then above all, we don't try to assume that learning took place. Instead, we use active learning activities and evaluations to improve retention, preferably a test before, and which is a pre-test, and a test afterward, a post-test, so that we can see the extent to which people learned. So there are things you do want to do and you don't want to do when it comes to microlearning.
So now that we've talked a little bit about microlearning, what it is, what to do and what not to do, we want to show you some examples of how that can manifest first in the classroom setting. So as an example of things that you can do in the classroom to ensure you're doing microlearning is to take larger concepts, as Janette said, and break them into smaller pieces. What you see on your screen is an agenda from actually a day-long workshop, an 8-hour workshop that we've hosted. And you can see that we've purposely broken it up or chunked it, like Janette said, into different sessions and activities. So we purposefully have incorporated different speakers, different activities. There are practice activities that are built into each training. So where there are larger lessons, they're broken up, as you can see, by not only bathroom breaks and a lunch break where people can physically move around, but we have stretching breaks, and then also physical movement portions where they're physically moving from technical station rotations and participating in group activities. So we just wanted to show the agenda to demonstrate that there is purposeful planning of the microlearning. It doesn't just happen. And we're going to talk about some of these activities in the upcoming slides, but we wanted to emphasize that planning is really important. By building it into the agenda and scheduling time for activities, you can really engage your learners.
So how to do something with a short amount of time. One of the easiest ways to do that is with an activity we call Think, Pair, Share. This is an opportunity where you don't have to tell the learner what you can ask them. So for example, you can take a really complicated question. So here's a problem, right? Imagine you walked into a conference session that sounded interesting. After 5 minutes, you wanted to leave. There's another meeting you want to go to, but you're sitting in the front row. What do you do? So what you can do is ask your participants to think about this problem for a minute, pair them up with 1 or 2 other people to discuss. Again, give them a certain amount of time, say 3 minutes, to discuss amongst themselves, and then to report back to the larger group to share that information. So you're taking a very complicated problem and divvying out to the experts in the room to kind of come up with some of those solutions to share with one another. Another activity that works really well in a classroom setting, and you can even convert it to a virtual setting, is called 4 corners, where you take 4 corners of the room and you have an easel where you have a question. So you pose a question. Then you ask participants in the room to move about. You'll ask each group to answer one specific question. Yeah, we have an example on the next slide. And you can do one of 2 things. You can have the small groups answer and problem solve and report back, or you can take it one step further if you have the time and rotate your groups in each corner of the room. This way, each group is assigned one answer or one question to provide answers to. Again, leveraging the resources in the room to help solve some of the problems and to answer some of the questions of the material. Some other activities that we have that are fun to do either individually, in small groups, or in a large group, you can do it in person or you can transfer this virtually, is something we call compare and contrast. This enables critical thinking skills, it builds memory, and so you can show a good or a bad example. What to look for, what not to look for. You can also show them what's wrong with this picture. And what this does is it helps to build their skill sets in what they already know and reinforces what they either have assumptions about or have knowledge about. They can work together individually, as an individual or in small groups to share their knowledge. So here's a great one. What's wrong with this picture, right? You can take a look at it and identify as an individual or a group all the things that is wrong to help facilitate additional learning and conversations.
Another thing that you can do is implement active learning simulations. Janette mentioned this before. If you want participants to learn, in this case, how to decontaminate or respond to a chemical spill, simulate it. I believe in this scenario, we use drinking soda and baking soda, those substances to simulate a chemical spill in which learners were asked to obtain materials and personal protective equipment, then simulate the responses if they were working with hazardous materials. So as we mentioned earlier, the cone of learning, people remember really well when they participate in active learning through the simulation of experiences that they might come across. The next slide, we have an example of gamification, and despite the name, the focus here on this strategy is not on the game itself, but the gamification of learning. So that is using activities to incorporate competition and reward to enhance the learning experience. Some examples you see on screen are Legos. We use them quite frequently in our workshops. In the first example you see in the upper left-hand corner to simulate or teach emergency communication. So we have people using handheld radios to build, they're competing to build a Lego structure, and this reinforced teamwork and communication skills that you might come across in an emergency operations center setting. Also, Legos beneath that in a HAZWOPER exercise to demonstrate the dexterity of gloves and respirators and other PPE by having people compete to put together Lego towers while wearing the PPE. It's challenging and really encourages focus on the lesson. Another game that we've used is Jenga. You see that in the upper right-hand corner. This was used to teach about root cause analysis, where each Jenga piece represented a possible cause leading up to an incident or an event, and whereby pulling the pieces, you are investigating possible factors leading up to that event. We talked about simulation before, so in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see a kiddie pool that was used to demonstrate decontamination, and you can kind of gamify that by competing to get that mannequin through the decon simulation. And of course, there are trivia games such as Jeopardy or Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which are great to pose questions as precursors to a learning experience. And that, in our experience, is something that gets really competitive as well.
And other ways to add to gamification, or really participation, is to use some audience response systems. Janette mentioned that if we've got time, we'll show you an example of this, but there's plenty that are available for free or low cost. Some of our favorites are Mentimeter, Kahoot, and Poll Everywhere. But if you don't have access to that, or if you're not using electronic devices, you can always go old school and analog and use voting cards, using something as simple as a sheet of paper, an index card, or erasable whiteboards, where you can propose a question and have your participants respond, showing their cards on A or B. One other thing that we want to mention is the reflection piece. So we want to get away from lecturing at people, right? We don't want to tell them what they may already know. One way to do that is to encourage people to be the producers of their own knowledge. So here's an example of a reflection activity called What, So What, Now What? You can see there's a sample handout that you can hand out to individuals that people can have. If you're in a classroom setting, we like to put them up on the walls and use sticky notes to have an individual write their what, their so what, now what, right? What will you continue to start doing or doing differently? What will you stop doing? And what will you continue to do? And these are ways for individuals to learn in the moment, to reflect on their actions and their behaviors and think about how they might implement those changes.
So other examples of microlearning that we've used, which are really successful, is role-playing. We'll go over some of the examples that we spoke to just previously in a short amount of time, the first one being role play. So the aim here is really creating scenarios that have problems for people to resolve. You can see in the first example is a demonstration on communication, where people are asked to construct a paper design with their eyes closed. So the facilitator leads them through this activity where they need to listen with their eyes closed and pay attention to verbal cues only. It's something that I think only takes less than 10 minutes, but is really memorable for the participant who is in that role play of active listener. Also, another workshop favorite at the bottom is customer complaints role play. In this situation, we assign actors or presenters really that are experts in this area to respond to situations with what we call good and bad behavior or good and bad responses. This really helps the participants learn by seeing examples of behavior, the reactions to the behavior, and then learning preferred behaviors, responses, and outcomes. I think the key here is that there are problems which are being solved, and it's really memorable for people to participate and witness. Here we have an example that Heather spoke to previously regarding the Four Corners activity. So we have small group discussion. In this case, it was a discussion on program management with topics being priorities, credibility, and how to demonstrate effectiveness. We wanted to show you here that, as you can see in the photos, I think this was a workshop. We had about 65 to 70 people in a very small space. It really wasn't conducive to people walking around physically. So we had, after the group discussion, facilitators pass around these ideas and the outcomes of the discussions. So we were physically moving paper rather than moving bodies, but the concept is still the same, to facilitate small group discussion and the facilitation of ideas. Something you can do if you don't have a lot of space but still want to work that into your workshop.
Another example is being able to do hands-on activities in a technical setting. So what you see here is a sample of our EH&S professional workshop where we broke participants into 4 color groups. You'll see the 4 that are there on the screen. And they physically moved to a different location. They had 20 minutes to participate in the activity. And the next couple slides, we're going to go over what those look like. So in a very short amount of time, there's a way to demonstrate like a technical aspect. So the next one is, here's some examples. So for those of you in laboratory and research safety, these are examples of 3 different workshops that we've done. The first one was hands-on use of a meter. We had a demonstration of using proper PPE for cryo. And we also had, in the third one at the top right, you'll see our folks that are going around and doing a what's wrong with this lab. So it's another an actual example of an example we showed earlier on paper that you can demonstrate live. So they were able to go through. Going through very quickly down at the bottom, with our occupational health and industrial hygiene, there was hands-on physical activity with the use of various meters and experts to answer questions. In our environmental programs, we went through and gamified a question on how to sort hazardous waste materials and how to properly store chemicals. So there's some examples of how we were able to demonstrate and do that in a small group. On our next slide, we've got a couple more examples that have emergency and fire safety. So folks actually put on the various roles of an EOC, worked through a scenario. This one was with s'mores on what they needed to do, as well as hands-on fire extinguisher safety training. Environmental health is also a really popular one to do in our technical stations because we were able to go through and demonstrate how to test for some pool water. We went through on hand washing technique. We used, as you can see in the very last picture there at the bottom, glow germ to demonstrate to see how folks, what is the most effective way to wash your hands. And we had 4 different activities. So these are very hands-on, technically savvy, fun, might I say fun ways to demonstrate a technical aspect of what we do. And last but not least, in our workshops, we went through leadership and we used our small group discussion to really focus, on teamwork. This was a this team versus that team activity. You can see we're very, very much a fan of using sticky notes. It's an easy and cheap way to engage your learners. They can be done in small groups and individually. And what we were able to do is ask folks in small groups, what are some common characteristics? They came up with those characteristics. They physically moved about the room to add it to their larger sticky note, and we got started to see from a large perspective the similarities and differences, and we're able to build our idea of the perfect team. So here's another example.
In addition to some of the small group discussions or small group activities, microlearning can be used for larger groups, and you can see here some photos from an activity that we do to teach about how to avoid a pandemic outbreak, which is actually quite timely for what we are going through right now. But this is something that has been incorporated into our workshop for some years now, and it's really just a way to engage a larger group where everyone is participating and moving around. Essentially, without going into too much detail about the activity itself, you can see that this is a very different class example. People are moving, kinesthetically learning, and speaks to the cone of learning that Janette was talking about by actively engaging the participant in their learning experience. There's another example of a photo that you saw that talked about hand hygiene using glow germ, which is a way to engage everyone who physically goes to the bathroom to wash their hands. We've shown many examples of classroom microlearning activities, but we realize that you may also be developing online learning. That's something that we do, we're really proud of, and is really also timely. People are engaging more in online learning. So we want to show you how we incorporate active learning into online training as well. It's something that we're happy to discuss at greater lengths outside of the webinar if you would like to contact us. But what you see on the screen is some examples from our EH&S Generalist online program that supplements our in-person workshops. So as you can see, what we encourage you to do is build modules versus one long lesson. So rather than taking curriculum that might take an hour to be lectured on, take that and break it into something that's 10 to 15 minutes and broken up by modules. So you're chunking this and also dispersing throughout engaging activities such as drag and drop examples that you see in the lower left-hand corner, checklists, multiple choice questions with visuals are really helpful, but really you're chunking this material to engage the learner. On the next slide, we have another example. It's one of our favorites from a reasonable accommodation training that we created. And it's a demonstration of review, watch, respond activities. So the learner is given some background information in the review situation, and then watches what you see on that middle screen is actually a video. So it's a short video scenario that they see, and then they respond to the situation that they've been presented. Rather than lecturing to them or having them review information and making decisions, which are then supplied correct and incorrect feedback to support their learning experience.
So we wanted to share some of our resources. We've created a library of free online resources that we've accumulated in developing online and in-person training. So if you go to that website, training.ucr.edu/references/resources, you'll be brought to a web page that looks like this, and you can click on each of these boxes and there'll be a drop down of links below it. On the left-hand side, I've highlighted a few that we have utilized and really like to use. So just kind of as a brief overview for audio and video, as we talked about earlier, you learn about 50% of what you see and hear. So it's really helpful to reinforce ideas with audio and video. So these are a few free audio recorders and video editors that make it really easy to build straight from your computer with limited equipment. With images, as we talked about, it's visually helpful to break up text with images, whether it's a PowerPoint or handout. So we've provided a lot of links to free pictures, graphic design tools, icons. It makes it super easy to find and incorporate into your trainings and make it much more engaging and easier to learn from. We have assessments like Kahoot and Mentimeter. As we've learned, you learn most from active learning, and we've utilized both of these tools in webinars as well as in-person trainings to engage the audience. And I think we're going to engage in some of these afterwards, but they are websites that participants can use just directly from their phone to answer questions and engage with other participants. We've always got really positive reviews on utilizing them. And then lastly, we have collaboration tools like Notely and Real-Time Board. This is just another way to engage. It simulates kind of like in-person engagement with having online whiteboards and post-it notes so that people can share their ideas and collaborate with each other. It's easy and really free, super easy and free to use. And so I've just only highlighted a few of the websites that we have accessed, but if you go to our website, you'll be able to see a lot more, and we constantly are updating it. So please feel free to save that link and utilize it to enhance your trainings as well.
So now that we've gone over a few things, we wanted to kind of demonstrate one of the activities that we were talking about. And what we're actually going to have you do is go to a website, preferably on your phone if you're willing to use your phone, but you can also use a separate browser. So what I'll do first is I'll kind of summarize what we're talking about, and then have you guys, when you have a chance, open up a web browser. The web browser is menti.com, and there's a code you enter, and it's here on the screen, 56, 67, 78, and 9. But before we go there, just wanted to reiterate that microlearning is just short bits of information to help people easily retain the training that you're giving. And that's just because people generally forget. The average human attention span is about 7 minutes. I mean, that's how long I take about 6 minutes before I kind of get bored of watching a YouTube video. But anyway, so we want to give out short bursts of information in the form of microlearning because people forget. And because people forget, there are things such as what we showed in the cone of learning that you can do to help people remember. And that's usually in the form of active learning activities. Microlearning, you can integrate it by breaking down lessons into shorter times and integrating activities. Activities we showed included things from scenarios to role plays to compare and contrast. And we had just shared some examples of things that we have done at the University of California, including workstations and online trainings. And the resources that we've used are all available, and they're all free and on the website, which will be shared after this webinar. So now that we are here, we wanted to get you to a point where you're interacting with us. Again, on your phone, if you're willing to use your phone, open up a web browser and type in menti.com, menti.com, and then you're going to enter this code. In fact, I'm going to just switch to it really quick. You're going to enter the code 56, 67, 78, and 9. And it looks like a lot of people have already done so. What it will do when you go to menti.com and use the code, it will ask you for your name. And so go ahead and take a moment to enter your name. I see everybody from Tom to Larry to Renee and Jessica and Edna and Jeff and Janet and Jonathan, Ellswick and Donald. Although I like this person named the other guy, that's pretty cool. Cydia and Joanne. So everybody's joining us, as you can see on my screen if you have it open. And in a moment, I'm going to go ahead and go to a question. And what you're going to do using your phone or your web browser is you're going to answer the questions, and it will show up on my screen. So everybody will be able to see. They won't be able to see what you had entered, but they'll be able to see what everybody's entered. So let's give everybody a moment. Again, preferably on your phone, you're going to the website menti.com, menti.com, and entering the code 56, 67, 78, and 9. Menti.com, 56, 67, 78, and 9. And then it will ask you for your name. I think we have a good majority of people, so we'll get started shortly, but just give me a couple more minutes, a couple more seconds. If you don't join right away, that's okay. You can actually join at any moment. So at any moment when we're running this, even if you weren't there at the very beginning, you can still go to the website and enter the code, which will always be at the top of my screen. Menti.com, 56, 67, 78, 9. Great, we have a good number of people. The word cloud is getting bigger. So I see Nimal and Christy and Stephen and John Lane and Remy, Janette, pretty cool name Janette has, Heather S, Alice and MC. Okay, I think we're going to get started. So I'm going to go to another screen and it will actually ask you for your name again. And so it's going to ask you for your name again so it can keep track of your score. So in the next screen, go ahead and enter your name one more time. And when you're ready, you should be able to see the icon that you entered on the screen. And so you should have an avatar associated with your name. So again, enter your name just one last time, and hopefully you see your icon on the screen as we're all joining again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to go to the next slide, and it's going to ask you a question. So use your phone one more time to answer the question. So here's a question. Microlearning helps to what? So does microlearning help to make people memorize or demotivate people or reduce cognitive overload or deliver large units of learning? So use your device to select the answer to the question. Microlearning helps to. You have about 5 seconds. And time's up. Okay, so microlearning helps to reduce cognitive overload. So if you answered that correctly, excellent job, and you'll be able to be placed at the end on a leaderboard where you'll see how you compare against other people. So microlearning is not intended to help people memorize. It's intended to help people develop skills. It's intended to help people tap into the motivation to learn, and it's intended to deliver short bursts of learning. So I have another question coming. There are about 3 of these. When you're ready, we're going to go ahead and use your phone or your device to answer this question. And the question is, to integrate microlearning, reduce what? And integrate activities or practice. So do you reduce simulations? Do you reduce time? Do you reduce think, pair, and share activities? Or do you reduce Rubik's Cubes, which is what we showed earlier? So to integrate microlearning, reduce blank and integrate activities. And the answer is time. So to integrate microlearning, you want to reduce time. So congratulations to 44 of us who got it correct, but we don't want to reduce simulations. We actually want to use simulations. We actually want to use think, pair, and share, and we want to, well, we don't, if you can integrate Rubik's Cubes, that's great, but we don't want to reduce anything other than time of your lessons to 10 to 15-minute increments. Okay, so I have one more question. And when you are ready, this is your final chance to get a score. The last question is, which activity incorporates active learning? So which activity? Is it lecture activity that incorporates active learning? Is it reading from PowerPoint? Is it talking all day? Or is it scenarios? So which activity incorporates active learning? You have about 7 seconds to answer before we can see where you're at. So which activity incorporates active learning? It is scenarios. Awesome. So it's not lecturing, which is probably what many of us grew up seeing in our classes and trainings. It's not reading from PowerPoint, so therefore we want to try not to do that. It's not speaking all day, but instead it's incorporating activities where people are engaged, like scenarios. Excellent. So here is a slide that shows the top, I think, 10. And if you got it not only correct, but quickly, you then get placed on this leaderboard. And so Jonathan, congratulations, Jonathan, the lion, for getting not just the most accurate, but the quickest. And so you got the most points. But you are very, very quickly followed by Sabrina, and then Jessica, and then Jonathan J. Jenny and Karen, Eileen, MC, Andrew, and Alex. So congratulations to our top 10 answerers, and hopefully that was interesting for you to do. Since we do have a bit of time, I do have a slide that's going to kind of spill into our questions and answers, but the next slide, using your device, that we wanted to give you an opportunity to work with us on is a question. Do you have any questions about what we covered, from what microlearning is to the cone of learning to activities or the stations? So use your phone or your browser to ask us any questions, and we can always kind of go around and see if you have any questions and try to address it as a group. So do you have any questions? We appreciate your thanks, and we appreciate you guys appreciating us. We'll share the slides and links. Yes, we will share the slides and links after this. I believe Jessica will go ahead and broadcast that to everybody. Do you have recommendations of how to develop online simulations? We do, and it uses some of the same principles of reducing it to modules of 10 to 15 minutes each, which, you know, in a training online simulation, it's about 3 to 5 modules, but you can use what's wrong with this picture a lot to develop online simulations, and we probably can talk endlessly about this. So if you are interested in work in our multitude of recommendations, we will send our email out, which is training@ucr.edu, and we can go ahead and respond to you with some of those recommendations. How about, is there a preference for small standalone courses versus comprehensive courses with micro topics? So this is a good question, because sometimes we have just one opportunity to train people on a lot of things, and then that's it. They don't want to take more. I think in the University of California, we're trying to put more comprehensive courses together, but within each comprehensive course, break it down into separate, like I said, modules, so that it's not just kind of a run-on set of slides that just take 3 hours. A lot of the courses are, you know, easy. Well, if you're taking it online, you can easily come back. But I think we definitely want to do comprehensive courses, even in instructor-led format, but break them down into lessons that are 10 to 15 minutes long each. Oh, Menti. So you guys are using Menti today. Yes, anybody can use Menti. It's actually free. It's free for a certain amount of people that you want to have join. If you have like more than, I forget how many, I think it's 40 people. Today, for example, we have like almost 100 people. Then there are some pricing levels that you'd have to pay into. It's very, very cheap. It's less than $10. I know that. It's probably $5 a month. But yes, anybody can use Menti, and there's a free version which you can just use, and it'll be fine. Can microlearning techniques be used for regulatory requirements? That's a great question. Yes, we use it all the time. In fact, the regulations never specifically say how you should be delivering training. I think that's a common thing, especially in California, where we're so heavily regulated. They will tell us, this is what you need to cover, like bloodborne pathogens, these are the topics. But they never really say how you're supposed to do it. They never tell you, you must lecture or do a PowerPoint to go over the training. You can very well be giving out training in the form of a handout and say, read the handout, and here's your training. We don't recommend you do that, but we do incorporate microlearning in terms of, we take a set number of regulations and we break it down into its major topics, and then we just replace the lecture part of it with just those activities that we were sharing. And then, does your team have a system to assist EHS officers to keep track of training? I think this will be the last one, and then we'll move into the more formalized chat questions if we have them. Yeah, so we're actually part of a risk and safety system in the University of California. We support environmental health and safety, and we actually function as a training managers. And so Heather Davis, for example, Heather Davis Russell is over at UC Riverside, and she keeps track of training. She works with the EHS officers or subject matter experts to develop it, but also to develop reports when they're asked to, and track the completion of Cal-OSHA courses. So we can probably talk a little bit how we're structured. But thank you for asking. We are actually integrated with not just environmental health and safety, but risk management. Okay, so I think we're going to switch. I think what we'll do is we'll try to come up with a Q&A document to answer some of your questions. And maybe Jessica can address these questions, such as, will we get an attendance certification, and other things related to the actual webinar today. But what we wanted to do is not just answer questions, but show you that it can be very engaging to use activities such as this. This is a polling activity or an audience response system made by Menti. There's also Poll Everywhere, and you can use this very quickly. I think we just took about 5, maybe 10 minutes at the most to engage you, and it was really fun, and we found some really cool winners, right? And so it's you definitely can do it through webinars, through online training, through instructor-led training is the best. So that's one thing we wanted to share is that activity. We appreciate you participating. We got a lot more involvement than I thought we would get, so that's great. And we are at the end of our session. We just wanted to say we really appreciate your focus on microlearning, and hopefully these examples have helped you. If you would like to send us a message or get copies of our slides ahead of time or anything like that, or get some of these questions answered, email training@ucr.edu. You can also visit the website training.ucr.edu, and then My-Linh Tran had shared the resources website earlier. It's actually a button at the top of the website. So if you go to our webpage, you will see the resources available to you, or references available to you, and you can also call us. So thank you very much. I think we're going to go ahead and stop there. On behalf of the Risk and Safety Training team, which is myself, Cassandra Greenawalt, Heather Davis-Russell, and My-Linh Tran, we appreciate your involvement in today's webinar. So I'm going to hand it over to Jessica in case there are questions that she wanted to facilitate.
Hi, yes, thank you guys so much. It was just so informative and amazing, and I love that everybody was able to be so engaged and interactive. So I also want to thank all of you participants for really taking the time to engage with the content and with Menti. So I appreciate it. Also, just to go ahead and answer everybody's question, it's standard for us we send out an email the day after the webinar. It'll have your mandatory evaluation, which will lead you to your certificate of completion. This will be sent to anybody who was at the live webinar for at least like 85% of the time. So we will also send out a link of all the resources that Janette has shared with us today, and the slides will also be on the website. So they'll be available, and we will also put the links up to the UCR website so that you guys can find out anything you need from them. If you have any more questions, if you guys can go ahead and put those in the Q&A box, I am going to ask them a couple more questions that we have. So please, by all means, if your question wasn't answered earlier, go ahead and add it in here and we'll ask it now. The first question that we have is, when learning modules for e-learning, what is a good frequency? So once a month or bi-weekly, or what do you guys have for advice for doing these learning modules?
So this is Janette. I'll start, but then I'm going to also defer to Heather Davis-Russell as she's a training manager at Riverside. But when we have learning modules for e-learning, so sometimes the frequency is not actually up to us, at least in the University of California. We're kind of provided a frequency which we must give people training. In many cases, our trainings are required a refresher every year. But so I'm not sure if that answers the question. There are systems we have in place where people are given a list of trainings they must complete, and we generally give them a certain amount of time to complete those courses. So if you're new staff and you need to take 10 different e-learning courses, we'll give you, if not 1 month, 2 months, in some very rare cases, 6 months to complete the trainings. So at their own pace, they can either complete it all in one day or maybe over time. Not sure if that helps. So Heather, did you want to add to that? When we have learning modules for e-learning, what's a good frequency?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think one of the benefits of e-learning in general is it does allow the learner to do it at a time that works for them. So depending on your audience, for example, at Riverside, we have our EH&S staff who can manage their time and choose a time that works for them. But I also help, say, our facility service team and our project managers. And so we also are trying to be mindful of encouraging them to do about an hour of training a month. We try to break down our recommended e-courses in 4 of those courses. So again, we're looking for shorter bite-sized pieces. Generally speaking, while our courses are comprehensive, we're trying to keep our frequency or our length of those courses in 30 minutes or less. So even if someone's able to give us the 30 minutes once a week over the course of a month, that seems reasonable. So those are some of the benefits of designing courses with the learner in mind, knowing that training does take time. It is a resource that individuals are giving us, that their time is their resource. So we want to make it worth their time. So when we do learning plans, our goal is anywhere from 3 to 4 e-learning courses in a month, especially when we're talking about OSHA required courses, to at least get new folks or folks that need retraining on a frequency or on a plan year after year. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you both so much for those wonderful answers. Let's see, so we have another question, and this is with regard to Menti also. And so is this something that you think is difficult to set up for the instructor, and what is needed to do ahead of time if you're going to use that for your training presentation?
So I'll go ahead and take that one. It's a great question. Menti is actually easy. And I'll kind of show as we talk along. So it's basically a system where you have to just create an account. It takes a minute to create an account, and once you create an account, you can create a new presentation. And so it functions a little like a PowerPoint, where in each slide you are able to enter a question, right? On the right side of the screen, I'm showing you that you can enter a question, and you can actually define what kind of question you're asking. Like the very first question we did was like sort of an open content where people type your answers into a word cloud. But the ones that we had done later were basically multiple choice questions where you can select it and then later go into it and define the correct answers and select the correct answer. So I will be honest, I set up the Menti right before the webinar, and so it took about, I've done it before, so it took about 10 minutes because the system is so simple. It's just creating an account, creating a new sort of presentation, and then adding slides for every question that you have, and then basically defining the answers and which one's the correct answer. I mean, I think the hardest thing after this is to take a screenshot of like the first slide so that people will know to go to it when you are ready to present. And so basically this can be done at any time. I started presenting, which when you click on the upper right hand corner, that present button, I started presenting kind of right before the webinar started, or you can do at the end of the webinar, but the time that it takes is very, very nominal. It's about 10 minutes to set up, depending on how many questions you have. So hopefully that helps.
Yes, thank you so much. That is very helpful, I think, for any of us that want to use that. So thank you for doing that kind of hands-on tutorial for us. So another question that we have, do you have any tips on group work in the virtual setting, since with coronavirus and the pandemic, everybody is working, a lot of us are working from home now. So what ideas do you have about interactive group work in the virtual setting?
This is Janette. I'm actually going to defer that question to 2 people on my team, Cassandra Greenawalt and My-Linh Tran. Both of them have been engaged in some work just last Monday that we had done in a webinar setting, some group activities, or I know Cassie can probably speak to some field work examples. Perhaps My-Linh can share what's something that she's done and recommendations she would have around group work in a virtual setting like this.
Yeah, so one really helpful tool is utilizing the breakout rooms on Zoom. It's really easy to just place people in smaller groups, and this is kind of a really cool way to do a virtual think, pair, share. So just kind of getting people into smaller groups to engage with each other, and then bringing everyone back to the main room to share some of those ideas. It's really helpful in some of the trainings that we've done, and I'll defer to Cassie to talk about some of the ones she's done.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, first I want to say thank you for the question. It's something that our team talked about in preparation for this discussion as well. Now that we are moving into the virtual setting, I think everyone is kind of stretching their previous behavior and their learning techniques, and we're finding really embracing learning online. And part of that is even through, like Janette mentioned, our staff meetings. So it's a relatively more informal way to engage people, putting them into the breakout rooms, posing scenarios or doing problem solving activities in the breakout rooms, having small discussions, small group discussions, and then coming back. On the screen that you see an example of problem solving and scenario-based learning that was facilitated by using the breakout rooms. This is also a strategy that we've used in some of the webinars we've hosted. One of the topics was a little bit more sensitive on sexual harassment and assault prevention. We used breakout rooms in that scenario as well to talk about what would you do if you were involved in this situation. There was discussion among the groups who came back and did kind of sharing out. And we had really good feedback and found that those situations were really well received. It is memorable and it allows for discussion of ideas where people might not be so willing to share in a larger group. So it's very possible. They're really easy to use. I think Heather might be able to speak to that a little bit more as well, but something that we would really recommend.
Definitely, this is a great way to be able to use the example we showed earlier, the think, pair, share, to present a question or a problem and to assign the folks in your Zoom room into, smaller breakout sessions. You can do them ahead of time if you know who's attending, or you can do it randomly in the session as well. You can communicate with them as you're the presenter. You can give them a specific time. You can call them back into your main room. And so it's definitely something that you can do virtually that we recommend doing in a classroom.
Great, thank you so much for those answers as well. I really appreciate you guys giving such thorough responses. We do have, let's see, one more comment and then one more question. If anyone else does have a question, we'll be wrapping up soon, so go ahead and get those in there as soon as you can. The next question is, would you recommend using other platforms for videos to supplement micro topics? One challenge with comprehensive trainings is that retraining on staff requires full course completion. Do you have any recommendations for how to address this?
Jonathan, thank you for asking that question. It's definitely a challenge that we have in the University of California. So other platforms for videos, I'm wondering if you're speaking to the platform of YouTube versus Vimeo, or if you're looking for other ways of developing videos like the software. I guess I like a little bit more of your question. I do agree that it's challenging when you have to retrain people, and that's because we're retraining adults. And they have only so much motivation to learn something that they already know. So instead, my videos actually happen to be a form of a little bit of a passive learning example. And so we try to use videos very sporadically, because basically when people watch them, they're just watching. I mean, they're good, but it would be better to use them sort of with a scenario in mind. And so I don't know, with a small example, I've shared some videos on safety, vehicle safety, and all the things that people were doing wrong. We've actually videoed people pretending that they're doing the wrong way of doing things. And so you can do it on your phones, or you can use a formal camera, but sharing that in a setting would be very, very quick in a microlearning setting, which is we usually share what's wrong with what people are doing in the video, and then have each group discuss kind of what the answers are to that question, what's wrong with this video, instead of what's wrong with this picture. So I'm not altogether sure if that helps, but when it comes to retraining, what I tend to do is not actually go over the content again, but certainly use people in the audience to share their examples for every topic. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Heather, maybe I can look to you to answer. I know Heather facilitates a lot of trainings with our facilities folks where she has to bring them in on multiple topics. And so has probably come across the problem of people who've already been in the class and already know the content. And so I don't know if you can share what you've tried to do to engage people who've been here for many years taking the same course.
Oh, it's certainly challenging, especially when you have those annual courses. That is, for the most part, the same information. I think, we're not in a place with COVID where we're in our large group settings as we used to be. When we were in those settings, I'd often pull the room for the level of expertise and experience, and be able to really resource and leverage those that have been here the longest, engage them in sort of mentor type leading of the discussions, and pairing them with people that are perhaps newer to the campus. One of the things that we're addressing currently is taking short videos and making them available in our learning management system, which is how we track our training, and adding more to those resources as part of their completion. So I know there's a question about ergonomics on there. We have, the COE has put together a lot of really fantastic short ergonomic videos. And what we're doing at UCR is putting those and packaging them in our learning management system so that at the beginning of a shift, our facility services team can all log on and view it or view it together and get credit for those. And we're looking at learning in 5-minute pieces as opposed to a 30-minute webinar or hands-on training. So we're looking at a variety of ways to not only get the information across, but to really leverage people's time, knowing that that's a limited resource.
Great, thank you again so much. And just to Christy, she asked if you can share your ergonomics training information. Is that something that's available on your website or?
Yes, yeah, it's definitely on our website. So if you go to our website, training.ucr.edu, there is a link to courses and even a link within courses to videos where anybody can view our trainings at any time. And we also have videoed a lot of the hands-on activities we've done around ergonomics, which I think is like the funnest topic because you can do so much with the stretching and then encouraging people to do some running in place and then taking their pulse and whatnot. But we've recorded a lot of that. And if you aren't able to find it on our website, definitely email us and we can navigate you to where you may see those things. But yes, our website has training.ucr.edu has all of our courses for free. They're actually, it's actually set up to be previewed by staff before we publish it. So it's open for the whole public to see. So definitely visit and take a look at our courses when you have a moment.
Great. Okay. So I just want to thank everyone again for this wonderful presentation, and for everybody who joined us. We just appreciate you being here and being so interactive. Be sure to check out our website for more information at coeh.berkeley.edu/about-CE. And again, we will send out the link tomorrow afternoon with the webinar recording and the evaluation link, any resources, and that will all be posted online at coeh.berkeley.edu. If you did log in with your registration email today, you will get the email for the evaluation link. When you complete that evaluation, you'll be able to apply for a certificate of completion worth 1 continuing education contact hour. This will be for anybody who's here live today, and you will have had to have logged in with your email, not called in. So again, thank everybody so much for these great questions and participation, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.
Thank you.